Are you an adventurer looking to take your hunt to the next level? Then you're in the right place. Welcome to East Meets West Hunt with your host, Beau Martonik.
That building the mock or doctoring up the scrapes, like doing the mock scrapes and stuff, that works. Like I started messing with that. I watched that podcast with Troy Pottinger.
Yeah.
And I took and was like, you know what? I'm going to start playing with what he's doing and see if I can do it here. And I replicated it and stuff. And I'm like, it does work here. Like, and like, it does like that buck, you can create the illusion, and that buck will come back and check that spot. You know?
Yeah.
You know, I'm like, that's pretty sweet. That's something I'm throwing in my tool bucket for futures, you know?
Yeah.
Because like I always did the scrapes and stuff, but I never really bothered with them too much. Like I knew it was like, okay, I'll put a camera on this scrape because I always get deer on this camera, you know. But like I never really played with them and adjusted them or anything. And like I'm like, oh, this actually works pretty good, you know, certain situations.
I carry a bottle of forehead gland scent in my bag all the time, and I'll spray licking branches and just kind of freshen them up. There was this one buck, and I've told this story before on here, but there was a signpost rub that I would spray with the forehead gland scent, and within 24 hours, this 7-year-old deer would show up. It might be in the middle of the night. The one time it was an hour after I left during the day, and he would shred that thing again. No other buck would touch that rub. They might pass through it, but as soon as someone else put their scent on that, he got so pissed off and just like would come in and just it was his rub.
I killed some nice bucks off of signpost rubs. I like using those. That's a good starting point too if you don't know where to go. Like if I'm going to go check over here at the signpost rubs and see where to go. But like sometimes I feel like that's one of the most consistent places to see a big buck in the big woods is off a signpost rub, because that's where all the bucks travel and meet.
Yeah.
You know, everything else could be totally random. It's tough when you're hunting beds and stuff on some of these bucks in the mountains. Like you might like. It's so depressing if you put cameras and stuff on these beds. You know, you'll be like, oh, he comes in here like 4 times a month.
Yeah.
You know, it's like
so true.
Great. That's gonna help me, you know. But you put a camera on one of those signpost rubs and you're like, wow, this buck goes through here like 3 times a week.
Yeah.
You know? And then maybe once a week it's daylight. You know?
Yeah. It's so funny. And so that buck that was doing that, and I remember I went in and I checked that camera. It was only a couple days after I was there because I was hunting that area actively, and I was going in to hunt, and I was like, dude, this guy came in. It was like a nasty storm, and I was hunting off the ground, and I checked the camera, and I just kind of went out, and he came back in like right before dark and shredded it. I'm like, he's living around here somewhere. So like it was like November 16th, 17th. It was in 2020. It was later in the year. It was real nasty. We had some snow in, and it just after the front came through. It was cold, and I went in to hunt that rub, and he was laying right there, like 15 feet away from the tree in the bottom, in a wide open, like hemlock bottom. He was laying right there, and I bumped him up when I went, and I just saw he was like, I don't know, 20 some inches wide, just big 10 point. And I just wanted to cry when he took off there.
Yeah. That's something I see a lot is I see the big bucks down in the bottom sometimes.
Yeah.
Like they'll get down and they like them swamps down there in the bottoms, that swampy spots. And, you know, that's where I hunt most of my stuff in Pennsylvania. I stick to the swamps. Even if there's hills, I go to the swamps. Like the swamps seem to always have the bigger deer in them.
And, you know, okay, how to say explain a little bit more about that, because that's interesting, because there's an area that I've hunted for years, and I've only ever had success there during the rut, but I've always been in these swampy bottoms and these like places that it's just like that's where, and a lot of times the does will be bedding in there too. But I want to hear kind of your thoughts on the swamps.
I think it's a lot because of the thermal draw, for one. It's always creating a vacuum down in there. So with the high pressure in Pennsylvania, the deer just kind of know that's I can smell everything when I live here. Especially a lot of Pennsylvania, it doesn't have those giant mountains. It's just kind of rolly, gradual, like those hills. So it's not enough terrain for them to bed up high. They'll use it to go up from the swamps and use it as food source up on the oaks and stuff on the high terrain. But you only get maybe a couple doe groups and stuff that bed up on the tops, and then the secure bedding is going to be down on the bottoms in the swamps. And what's tricky about them is the bucks don't go into the swamps as much as they bed right on the edges of those.
Yep.
So like they see it coming down the hill, and then they're out of there. But when I'm looking at these swamps, I'm not just looking at a swamp. Like I'm looking at the back of the swamp. Like, so we're like, okay, he's going to be bedding along the edge. What is the back wall like? I want to have like layers in the swamp. I don't want the deer to just be like trying to run into an impenetrable forest.
Yeah.
Like he could be able to walk into it like 50, 60, 70 yards and wander through it to travel. And when you can find those places where they can walk through, then you find, okay, now I'm going to be where the buck is going to be bedding in this. A lot of times, like you'll find like a drainage, like a little creek or something washing down into the swamp. And right at that point is where you're going to start finding the bucks, because it's just that little change in habitat and it changes the swamp a little bit. And where it kind of makes like where it goes in, so it makes that back door for them.
Oh, and man, anyone that's listening, like that's such a gold nugget of information, those layers, because like you can look at this for not even just swamps, you can look at it for laurel or anything too, like, or, rhododendron, you get like the spots where it's open woods, and then you have like some kind of sparse, somewhat thicker, and then it gets like so thick that they don't even want to go in there. Yeah. But you find that middle ground, and there's two examples I can think of in swamp areas where the one place I called it the hidden valley, that was like this bowl system that ran down into this swampy bottom, and right at the bottom of that bowl was a bunch of blowdowns, and it was just like right on the edge of the swamp, and I call it the buck nest, because like it was only used in early season and late season for bucks to bed in this spot, but there would be even bachelor groups that would bed there in September, and they'd be on these different parts of the blowdown, and they could tuck right down into the thicker part of the swamp once the season came. But I learned it from blowing out so many deer in there, and I'd blow them out from a long ways away because everything was pulling down from all the ridges. And finally I got somewhat smart with it. And in gun season, I was in 2019 or 2018, I had a tag, and I was just still hunting along and sneaking. I was like, I need to figure out a different way to get in here. And I could hear people driving on the other hill, and I'm like, this is a spot that I feel like this deer would be a safe haven. So I like snuck around the side of the ridge and kind of just like poked close to, and I was just using my binos, and I spotted a buck pushing a doe around. It was December the 4th, and I just took my bleak can, and just a little Primos bleak can, and dumped it over twice, and he came running right up out of there, and I shot him frontal with the gun, and it was just like, that was something that came to me. And the other one was because I was finding sheds in this area, a different part of the swamp, where there was an old clear cut that started like filtering down and getting like a little bit more sparse. It was like cut a little bit differently. It was kind of open, a little bit of rocks, and it led into this little spring seep that ran into the swamp. And I would find sheds right there, and then some rubs kind of on the outside of it. And I truly believe there's a buck I'm still trying to kill that. He's going to be 9 years old, I think, this year. I think he lives in that spot.
Yep. And when you kill him, you're going to kill another one there the following year anyway.
Yep.
It's just going to be one of those spots. Just the way you described it, I'm like, yep, 100%. Like you just know,
And how do you get in, and like how do you hunt those types of spots? Like that's always the difficult thing.
Well, according to my buck in Pennsylvania, you walk in there and shoot him at 10 yards
I like that
because
strategy.
because that's how that one happened. But it's funny you mention that because that deer, when he was bedding, when I'm tracking him around that swamp, every time he started bedding was something like that. You know, he wanted that little drainage going down into the swamp, the little brook flowing in. You know, everything lined up. You know, you got the water current going down, you got the thermals running down in there. So when he beds right there next to that, everything's just kind of right into his face.
Yeah, that totally that
So
makes a lot of sense. And
the
like where I've struggled with that specifically in like outside of the rut is like
mhm.
where to set up when, and I've tried like different outskirts because like this one area I've known it for so long that
you
there's a big scrape it's on this side, there's a big scrape it's on this side, but there's still a couple hundred yards away and it's almost too far to get them coming out unless it's the
what
right
you got to
conditions.
do to kill a deer in that spot is go down in that swamp and figure out how to get across it. That as sucky as it sounds,
Yeah.
that's like because then you're coming in the back door, you know.
Yeah.
And you can, if you went in there even early season, like you can get in that, if you went in that spot and figured out how to get through the swamp and across the way he's not coming in, because he's going to be coming straight down the hill or channel along the sides of the swamp and go into that bed. If you can come in and get there in the morning and get set up directly over where that creek flows in, that thermal's all going to be pulling right underneath you, and you got him. All you got to do is he's just got to come in, you know. But you won't get busted,
Listen,
you know.
if well, I guess even if that buck did die of old age this past year, but if I
It
kill
don't
him
matter.
this
You're gonna
year
kill another
early,
one.
yeah, I was just gonna say that. But if I kill him, I'm giving you a call and I'm gonna say, Paul, thank you because that's it.
Yep,
I'm gonna definitely try that and
yep,
see if I can slide in on him.
yeah. Because that's what I've killed a couple in September like that in Jersey too, like hunting marshes and stuff. You know, it's the same thing. Like I like getting. I come in the back way. You got to figure out how you can get in. Sometimes you can't. It's almost impossible. It's so thick. You
Yeah,
know, it sucks. But once you get in there and you're in, you're golden. You know, because you're putting yourself on the back wall of where he's bedded, and a lot of times they'll come in and they won't bed right where you're set up in the morning, but they'll come in close and they'll bed and they'll lay in the sun or something, you know, and they'll be like, I'm going to lay here in the sun. And then I'm going to get up and I'm going to feed around on that stuff by the brook. And then I'm going to get up when I get hot and I'm going to walk down the brook and go deeper in and find a nice shady spot to lay under. And that's where you got to be set up. Because if you try to get in there and set up directly where his first bed is coming in the morning, he might be already laying there.
yeah.
You know, but if you can get in the back edge of it, like sometimes you can get like a 100-yard buffer from that first bed on the edge, where you can get in undetected. You know.
Although it would be a pretty. So we're recording this here in May and our turkey season's still in. Although it'd be a shitty turkey hunting spot, I may just have to give myself a reason to carry the gun in there and
Yeah.
try to find that tree so that, you know, to
Mhm.
have it before. I mean, it's pretty dang green here, but it's enough where you could, I
Yeah.
think you'd still get in there and find a spot.
That's what I always do when I find a big buck bed or something. If I'm going to try to bed hunt them, I always look for an afternoon spot, a morning spot, or possibly even an all-day sit on it. You know, like sometimes you can't get into these beds. Like it's impossible to physically set up on that bed for a deer coming out in the evening.
Yeah.
You'll never get him. He's never going to come far enough in daylight for you to kill him. Like he's just got you. But sometimes you can get right up over that bed in the morning and kill him, or sometimes you could just get in the area and get in the spot to kill him in the afternoon in the morning. And you're just going to have to sit there and suck it up and deal with it all day and not see any other deer the whole day. And then he's going to get up at 3 o'clock and walk over to you, you know?
Yeah, and you had mentioned something to me about that where you will sit all day during the early season in that type of
Yeah.
scenario, and that's
You
crazy.
got to do what you got to do. You
Yeah.
know, I don't want to do that. I try not to as much as possible. You know? But sometimes you find one. You're like, I can kill this deer if I do this. Like, I just
Yeah.
have to do it. You're gonna have to suck it up and deal with it. And you sit there and get eaten by bugs all day.
The mental game I always play with myself is like I always tell myself I only have to do this once if it works.
Mm-hmm.
Just like every day, just like I just have to
Yep.
do this once, do this hard thing one time, and then you might have to do it you might have to do it again, but like it's just
Yep.
you look at it in 1 day increments, like, okay, I just gotta do this once.
Yeah. And then 180 days in the season, you made it 3 times, maybe twice.
Yeah. Yeah. And, man, like, you think about how hard it is to sit all day during the rut. I can't imagine trying to do that early season and just like trying to keep your sanity. That's a
Yeah.
test.
That's why I use this owl. I'll sleep in it sometimes. I'll fall asleep.
Yeah.
I'll just put my head against the rope. I'm like, he ain't coming yet.
Yeah.
I'll be all right. If he comes, I'll open my eyes and I'll shoot him.
Yeah.
He's kind of barely nodding off. I'll just listen to the sound of the crickets. When that changes, I better start paying attention.
Yeah. And you're talking about like that earlier time of the year and like the forbs and the plants and all that stuff. You pay a lot of attention to those types of
Yeah.
things. And that's the hardest thing in the big woods is, most people look at it as if there's no acorns, what do I do? And there's so much more to it.
Exactly. And the thing is, there's places that don't have any acorns. I mean, you go to the Adirondacks, there's no acorns. There's no oak trees up there. That's like, I was at 4 million acres. There's no acorns. So the deer don't eat them. So you gotta find different stuff. But they have black cherry.
Yep.
They have beech. So you can find that. And then they're digging for ferns. They're eating old man's beard on the side of the trees. Like, they eat weird stuff, like a lot of mushrooms off logs and stuff. Like, anywhere in the big woods, the acorns is only like probably 10% of their diet.
And
Even in the fall when the acorns are dropping, if you cut one open and look in its stomach, it's not all just acorns in there. There's a
no.
lot of other stuff they're eating.
Yeah, and it's like and acorns are like when they have them, it's like their nice dinner they go to, but they still got to eat other food throughout the day to get to that point. And I'd say 80% of the areas I hunt have 0 oak trees, but I've always in the early season typically went to places that had oak trees and tried to capitalize on it. But it's like I've come to learn it's like I honestly I don't like hunting oak trees because it's so every year's so different and the deer do different things depending on what trees are dropping and everything, where areas that don't have oaks I think are more repeatable year after year.
Yeah, they're
that.
just there because the habitat's right.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And like there was I had a couple notes written down, like you were talking about jewelweed, which that's something you find in Pennsylvania and some other places, like the importance of that. Is it one of those plants? Yeah,
that's in like September time frame until it browns up about right around October. They stop hitting it. Is the jewelweed they stop hitting, but like September they run on jewelweed really hard, But in the summertime they really eat it too. But it's a water plant, It sucks up a lot of water, and it needs to grow where there's moisture in the soil. You can identify where it's growing just by the habitat.
Yeah.
Like, okay, it needs that certain soil to grow. But in like river bottom situations, that's like critical. Or in summer patterns when you're trying to get a buck on camera in Pennsylvania or something in the big woods, you put it down along swamps and beaver ponds and stuff like that, and the big marshy meadows and stuff like that.
Yep.
On the edge, like that's like you get that swing in their whole core.
Yeah, there was a spot that I had it on a scrape, but I didn't realize that there was. I don't even know what the type of grass is. I should know it, but maybe it even was jewelweed that was behind. I'm trying to picture it, but I had a camera. I was on the edge of this corner of this clear cut, and there's a big hemlock with a scrape under it. And the deer were laying in the hemlocks and the cooler stuff and coming out, and they were feeding this cut. And well, I had my camera on video mode, and I watched them just go over and eating these grasses. And what it was like a lower lying area that was kind of swampy, marshy, not like a ton of water or anything, but just wet enough that it grew these grasses, and they just pounded it through August and September. It was crazy how much they were eating that.
Yeah. If it wasn't jewelweed, it was some kind of other lily or something that they found in there.
Yeah.
Might have been like Canada daylily or violets, something like that. But all that stuff has more nutrition than a food plot. That's more nutritional than some food plot blends. So that's what they want. When they need to grow antlers or they need to produce milk for fawns or something, they're going to be looking for that high value food source. Because a buck really is like, he's a slave to his antlers 90% of the year. He has to eat quality food in order to maintain himself. That's why those deer in the real big remote woods don't always have the biggest racks. It's hard to find that. So when you can find that rare food source in the big woods, that's like a gem. That's a key spot, and like the biggest, most mature deer is going to be around that food source. Because he can use that for growing his antlers and becoming dominant and being the boss. He needs that.
Yeah, it's shifted my whole approach of, I used to look for the most roughest terrain in the most remote areas, thinking I was going to find the biggest deer, and maybe that could be possible, but but it has to also have the vegetation diversity.
Yeah,
like that's now my number one thing when I'm e-scouting an area is like, what has multiple things that come together here that can provide food, bedding, cover, all that stuff in one area.
Yeah. And that, to go back to that big buck I killed in Pennsylvania, that 7.5-year-old buck, that spot had all that, and it was 2.5 miles off the road.
Yeah.
So that's why he was there. It was perfect. Nobody was bothering him in there. Yep. That deer probably never really seen people that much. He just lived right there and just hid in that giant swamp. He had everything he ever needed right there in front of him.
Yeah. No, that's a perfect scenario right there. And it's like, the more I do this, it's like I'm always trying to figure out how to be more skilled in the earlier seasons. Most of the time I'm not hunting until late September, early October. But even then, it's like, I've killed some bucks there, but it's not like, definitely not. I don't feel extremely confident like I do later in the season as it goes. And it's like trying to learn these different food sources in these places that the bucks like in that type of time frame.
Yep. And to be honest with you, sometimes that if you're not getting on good deer in the big woods at that time of year, don't hunt it.
Yeah.
Go find a place that you can hunt.
Yeah.
Like I hunt a lot of river bottoms and marshes in September, early season, because of the terrain and the habitat they're using at that time of year is a lot easier to get on them and get close to them and get set up, because when they're bedding in that marsh, that river bottom situation, those suckers are bedded down. You walk within 80 yards of them and get up in a tree and they never see you. You can't do that in the big woods.
Yeah.
So like you gotta weigh your battles sometimes and like be like, yeah, I really want to kill this buck right now, but I might be better off driving an hour over here and hunting this area because this is a better habitat for the conditions I want to hunt in the time of the year. So sometimes you gotta be like, what's actually gonna work to kill this deer. You gotta where do I need to invest my time?
Yeah, and that's why I think it's important to have multiple areas like under your
Mm,
belt. Like as I was talking about, like there's certain places I like to go early season. There's certain places, and I'm not like I like hunting specific deer, but I'm not like all in. Like this is the only deer I'm gonna shoot this year. I like hunting
yep.
deer, and so like I'll bounce around to these different areas depending on what's right for that specific time frame. Like I know of a place that's like this side hill that's this old clear cut with these logging roads that go through it that is a sanctuary once gun season comes in. There's all, and even in the
Mm-hmm.
late season, there's always bucks in there. And it's like, I don't hunt that area any other time of year other than that. And
Yep.
that's just when I feel the most confident in it,
Yep.
and
Exactly. Like I don't hunt around here too much in November. Like I go out to Ohio and stuff like now
yeah,
because when those big bucks are locked down on does around here, it's hard to get on them. It's really hard because there's just not a lot of deer. So it takes a lot of effort to put in to find that giant buck and where the heck he could possibly be at that time and find him locked on the doe.
yeah,
And then you got to hunt them locked on a doe, which I mean, I pulled it off in the past. I killed my biggest buck in Jersey like that, locked on a doe, but it's not the best option. So,
yeah,
like, you go to Ohio, there's enough mature deer that there might be some walking around that aren't locked down, that are looking for their next one. There's enough competition. So like I'll go hunt the rut in there, and then my bread and butter for around here is October. That's when I like to kill my deer around here.
yeah.
When they're like right around the October, mid October, like from the 14th, 15th on, especially like Pennsylvania, you got that bear season that rolls in and stuff, and then that early muzzleloader with the does that now
Yeah.
and stuff, that pushes a lot of pressure on the woods all of a sudden, and then that stacks them. So now all of a sudden, all your bucks that were not exactly where you wanted them to be are now where you want them to be, and then you're hunting them on the scrape patterns. And that's lethal when you can get them when they're on that scrape pattern and they don't have does. It's lethal. It's dangerous for them.
Okay, so you like that mid to late October time frame of really like focusing on like
I
Pennsylvania.
always kill my biggest deer around here, like 15th to the 22nd.
Okay, yeah,
That's when I kill all my big ones.
and okay, so like what? With that being said, like where do you find these deer kind of going to? Like, are there certain like things that you find trends of like where they like to go after that some of that pressure and starting to hit those
They're
scrapes?
Yeah, big swamps on the
Yeah,
drainage is flowing into the swamps pretty much. Like you were saying before, you found that spot because you kept jumping deer. You know, you can find these spots where these big bucks are going to go to by just screwing up and jumping a lot of deer. You know, so like people that are listening, if you jump a lot of deer and they always run into a certain place, that might be a good place to go check after a situation like that where you get that early muzzleloader in the bear season and stuff. Okay, now I got to go. Now I focus here. All that other sign that was being made, that doesn't matter anymore because it's all gone. It was
hmm
being made and then it got blown up. So like you got to capitalize it on that way because you're hunting the pressure. You know.
and like these spots that you find them going to, you maybe see them running to or whatever. Like, are you going up and I know it's probably dependent, but are you sitting in a tree most of the time in these places?
Um. Sometimes I try to get in a tree if I can get a good angle, but I go in. I carry a large saddle platform, like the Lone Wolf Custom platform, and then I have the saddle harness, and I use that like a little mini tree stand, and I just kind of stand on the sucker, and I'll put my back to the tree if I got to face backwards in a hemlock tree. I do whatever I got to do in that thing, But I only get elevated 4 shot angles. I kill most of my deer a stick and a half high, 2 sticks high. You know, I hunt real low. I just go just up. That's actually, I only carry 2 sticks. You know, that's all I
Okay.
even carry anymore. I have 2 sticks with aiders to my platform because I'm 6'3", I can get about 14 feet. You know, but most of my deer I kill about 7.5 to 10 foot high. You know,
Nice.
I stay nice and low. You know, because I want to get that angle in there, and I find that if you go and try to fart around next to these bedding areas and climb a tree 8,000 feet in the air, all you're doing is alerting every deer in the area. It's like raising a flag. You
Yeah.
know.
Yeah, because they're looking up and you're kind of skylined
Yeah.
and
Yeah. So you
being up there.
just stay low. Like a lot of times you're hunting in the laurel and stuff. You know, if you're in laurel or rhododendron, I just get up and I sit up and I sit up waist high in the rhododendron bush against a tree, you know, so I could shoot right over the top of the bush. But when I could just kind of hide in the top of the bush and use the whole bush as cover, you know.
Yeah, yeah, and that's such a good point. Like my uncle, that reminds me of a story he was talking about. He shot this buck and he was hunting it, and this buck was living in this laurel, and he's like, he doesn't like going high as it is, but he was in a climber, but he's like, I just got up just above. He's like, I just seeing above the laurel, and I saw his antlers coming through, and just hit this one little opening, and it was like,
Yep.
right on top of him before he got the shot. But it was like, rather than going way up and then a deer from a ways away can see you up
Yep.
in that tree.
Yep. And that's how all my hunts are. It's like you see the rack coming through and you can see the top of the head, the top of the rack, and you just kind of draw back and then he steps into the pocket and whack. You know,
Yeah.
they don't have a clue what happened at that point. You know?
And two, like with those setups, like are you hunting areas where you think there'll be trout, like bedding and shifting beds most of the time?
Yeah, shifting around. Well, it depends if I'm hunting all day or if I'm hunting, you know, in the morning, I'm expecting shifting beds. But in the evening, they're usually in their final bed by the time you go and set up for them.
Okay,
So
gotcha.
it's going to be a little bit different of a play between what you're doing between those, you know.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. And like with like the spots that you're picking, does there need to be sign there as far as like the your traditional like scrapes or anything? Or are you just kind of getting where you feel like that buck's going to be comfortable?
When I'm hunting them October, they usually are making scrapes right around their beds.
Yeah.
There's usually a couple scrapes right in the vicinity, and they're coming off a bed and dropping into some kind of hub. You know, they're looking for that thermal hub kind of situation where they can get that effect where there's like a good scrape in that area, you know.
And you are you dropping right down into that hub?
I try to in the evenings,
Yeah.
you know, but in the mornings and stuff, I'm not. I'm above it.
Yep.
Usually. You know, I like to get up above it. I try to get up behind them in the beds, you know, so because they usually, the thing is, what people forget about, like you get these bottoms with this scrape or something in it, and that buck is probably bedded up on the ridge somewhere right around there looking at that scrape. You know, he could be 150 yards away. He's probably visually looking at it. You know, and that's what these big bucks do a lot of times in these big woods is they just watch their scrapes. You know, so if you walk in and you're standing at a scrape and go, "Oh, this is a nice scrape. I should set up here," you probably already screwed it up.
Yeah.
You know, so you gotta find them ahead of time. You gotta know where they're gonna be. You know, or
Yeah.
go through and blow it all up and then come back a couple days later and hunt it.
Yeah, and you get some more consistency in the evenings down there too. Like
Mm.
the spot I killed my buck was in a hub with a big scrape this year, November 4th, and it was hot, but it was cool, a little bit cooler down there. But when I first climbed the tree, it was late because I decided to move, and it was like 3 o'clock in the afternoon. The wind was just freaking, whoom, whoom, this way, that way, all this stuff. But I knew from history that spot that like deer weren't traditionally living around there. They were passing through, coming from the neighboring ridges down. And I'm like, I'm okay as long as nothing comes at this exact time. And then like an hour before dark, the thermal pull goes down. And I was sitting right on the creek, and it's just like pulling it down. And that buck came from, somewhat downwind, essentially downwind, and came up through. But that spot historically right before dark has been really good in the evening.
And most of them are like 95% of the time. When do the deer drop to the bottoms? They're dropping when the thermals drop. So if you're afraid of being all sketchy in there and blowing your wind up to them, don't be there.
Yeah.
Just wait until the thermals drop and then go in.
Yep.
Just sit back and wait. Like I do that a lot. I'll get within 300-400 yards of where I want to go, and then I'll just sit on a log and watch my watch and wait for the time when the thermals switch. And you can predict when thermals switch very easily on Caltapo nowadays. It's not hard. You just go on there and you look at the sun exposure feature, and you go on there and it tells you the sun exposure, and it tells you exactly what time the thermals are going to switch, because it tells you when the mountain goes from sunlight to shade.
Yeah.
So okay, I'll just go in now. Same thing in the morning. You can predict, okay, the thermals are going to start coming up at this point in time. At this point in time, the bucks are going to be down in the bottoms. And at this point in the time of the day, they're going to be up here on the hill.
Yep.
And you can watch that thermal walk right up the hill on the time schedule, and you can see when the deer are following that up a hill in hill country.
Yeah.
Or mountains. It's the same thing. They follow the thermals up and down.
Paul, for a guy that just got a smartphone in 2020, you got this figured out. We were joking about that beforehand, but that's super powerful to be able to understand that, and when those thermals are switching and with the sun. I mean, use that out west all the time too. Same exact thing. It's like you're planning stocks on mule deer or whatever. It's like, okay, you can't go at this time because all of a sudden this is going to happen, and you're watching the sun, which there you can actually see it kind of happening, but or you can see the shade, and the trees start to have shade to different directions, and everything changing that.
Yeah, exactly. So around here you don't have that luxury, so you got to use some technology. That's why you use that feature on Caltapo a lot of times, because it's the only one that has the sun exposure right now.
Yeah. And then also like cloud cover, obviously can change that, but that's just by look. You can be able to determine that by looking at the weather too. Just like what's it supposed to be? Is it supposed to be cloudy, and if you're going in the evening, you're able to.
Is it going to be a high pressure day or a low pressure day? If it's low pressure, they're probably down lower.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh,
they follow it. The thermals are more important than wind direction. That's the most important thing, because it's consistent every day. There's always thermals going up at a certain time and always going down.
Yeah. The caveat to that would be is on high wind speed days it shifts it a little bit, or makes a little bit of problem, at least from my experience.
Mm-hmm.
Do you see higher wind days being a little bit more difficult for that?
Yeah, it'll change the elevation they're betting on. It's like the upper 1/3, the wind tunnel theory, right?
Yeah.
You got the wind coming over the top, the thermal's rising. Well, if you get a different variable wind speed, that's just changing the elevation that's happening at. So that wind tunnel is still there. It's just at a different elevation for the wind speed. So you'll get different layers on it.
What do you consider like high wind? Like what would you consider something that starts shifting that?
15, 20 mile an hour would be high winds for me.
Yep.
I like when I'm hunting the bottoms, I don't like any wind.
Yeah.
Yeah. But like if I'm hunting the tops, 8, 10 miles an hour, little bit of wind is good. Like enough to cover your movement, but it's got to be consistent. Which you have to pick times when the wind is consistent to hunt, certain points, like don't hunt a front in this spot because that's going to make it all swirly, like everybody wants to hunt the beginning of that cold front there. Oh, I got a cold front coming in. I'm going to go right to my best spot. But if the wind's all switchy in there and it's blowing all over the place, all you're doing is stinking it up and alerting every deer in the area, But if you wait till that front is getting to the tail end and it's starting to calm down, the winds are getting more consistent, and you're starting to get that northwest westerly wind switching to a south, when that wind switches to the south, it comes in with consistent wind speeds. So when you get to that tail end portion, now you move in there and get on there. They're still moving from the front, but the wind is cleaner, so you can get into a spot.
Well, yeah, and I've always heard the theory Mark Drury had, like talking about like the first south wind after a bunch of northerly or westerly winds to go in, and it's like, maybe I was talking about movement on that, but it might just be too that you're actually able to not blow things out.
Yeah, you're just not getting busted.
Yeah,
exactly.
And yeah, that's a really good point. And like for me, once it gets that 15-20 mile per hour thing, most of the time that's when I'm hunting off the ground, and I'm still hunting, because it's like a lot of times the spots won't stay even somewhat consistent for 10 minutes, let alone the time that you're going to be hunting in there.
Yeah, I do the same thing. Like I get crappy weather days, pouring rain and stuff. I'm scouting and blowing them out of beds.
Yep.
I do that all the time. I love doing that. I kill a lot of bucks doing it. You just blow them out. Like now I know where he is. Like, yeah. Sometimes it doesn't work the first year, but you blow them out and you're like, I know where you are now. I'm going to come back for you next year and I'll kill you. Or if it's not you, it's probably another buck that was in that same spot. You jump a big buck, you're always going to jump a big buck in that spot. They use the same places, like, because they work. Those spots work.
Yeah, and the condition based hunting, like looking at it from a standpoint of like what are the conditions telling you for that day and making your plan based off of that. I don't think that can be stressed enough. Like it's in my opinion, it's really not that hard to find good sign. It's really hard to figure out when to hunt it and how to hunt it, sort of speak. And that's like the thing you said about the bottoms. Like I talk a lot about hunting bottoms. I love hunting bottoms, but it's gotta be somewhat calm, because otherwise it's really, really difficult to hunt those places.
Yep. Well, you got Spartan Forge, the app. It tells you when to hunt the deer. It tells you high activity, low activity, core area, Instead of hunting them on the high activity days, hunt them in the core area days. Because now you know exactly where they are.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like instead of going all over the place and running all over the mountain, they're laying in their beds.
Yeah.
Now I know where they are. I don't have to worry about it.
I like that mindset. It's like that. Yeah, I like that.
Because you go on a trip, on a hunting trip somewhere, you can't determine the weather. It could change any day on you. You got to be able to hunt what you got. So you can't just be like, I'm going to hunt the optimum days for movement based on this weather pattern or something. You got to be able to go in there and kill that deer when you're there.
Yeah.
So you got to know where he is, where you got to be, and how you got to set up. And, you got to be flexible on it.
Yeah, because if you have a week off of work, okay, and you're going to Ohio or you're going West Virginia or wherever, and you have that time, just because the conditions aren't showing that they're perfect for this, doesn't mean what are you gonna do? Just sit in the camper and watch Netflix? Like, you're not gonna do that. You just got to figure out how to use that to your advantage. And you hear, I mean, last year was a perfect example of it. It was a shitty year for weather, during the rut and those hot and all that stuff. But it's like, it's not, you can't change the weather. So like, what are you going to do about it? Like, how are you going to figure it out? And it might not be easy, but you gotta give it a shot.
Yep.
Yeah.
And I killed my one buck last year, early October. I killed my 12 pointer. I killed him in the morning after I jumped him the morning before, trying to do the same thing. Yeah, I've been trying to kill that deer for 3 years. You know, he's always in there. I'm like, finally the stars aligned and I got the right positioning to kill him. I figured out I got to be in there in the morning on a south wind, or it's not going to work. That's the only way I could kill that deer. You know, so I got that condition. I went in there and I blew him out the first day, and then I killed him the second day. You know, I blew him
what did
out of
that
his
look
bed.
like? Like
What's that?
where was he like bedding at? Like what did it look like the
He was
spot?
bedding 150 yards off a road on a bluff in a bowl.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah. So,
That's challenging.
and then he was traveling benches from that bluff, because the bluff is probably about 200-foot elevation change from the road. You know, so he's traveling that bench and going out to agriculture that was over, I think, probably 1.75 miles away. You know, and that's what I picked him up down there. I picked his tracks up down there in the field, in a scrape in that field. You know, so I went in there 3 days earlier. You know, and I'm like, okay, he's here. I'm like, I know which buck it is. It's got the feet like this on him. You know, these giant feet, huge, 204-pound buck. You know, so big tracks. I'm like, okay, he's here. Well, he lives over there. I'm gonna go over there and set up for him. You know, I know where the deer's been going, but I still followed him in the first day and tried to set up on him in the evening, because I'm stupid and I keep repeating the same thing. I keep screwing up on every year, kill the deer. Never worked. Never saw him. I'm like, well, no, of course it didn't work. You know, the way the wind channels in that area, it just always blows like up into that bowl. You can't get around it. No matter how the wind, it always just goes right up into it, because of all the different benches and stuff. It just filters. So I go in there in the morning. I'm like, I'm going to set up on his bed that I found 3 years ago. I'm like, he always beds on this point. I go up there in the morning in the dark, go to set up to shoot him out of his bed. We're looking eye to eye, 20 yards away. He's looking at me. I'm looking at him, and he's like, I don't like this. I'm getting out of here. And he runs off. I'm like, well, I guess that morning's toast. It's like, what am I going to do? I'm like, I'll sit down by his bed, and while I'm in here, because I already blew him out, I'll just walk around and see what the hell he's doing in here. Yeah, so I walk in. I'm following his trail and stuff. I'm like, you're going down to the bottom of that bowl, and then going down that, cutting by that drainage. I'm like, that's where I'm going to set up. You know, I got that drainage because it's like a swampy bowl, and then there's like a little steep cut right there. So it creates a pinch point where he has to kind of funnel through here to walk through the bottom of that bowl. Creates a pinch point off the bluff. And then I have an excellent like thermal advantage right there. And I get over there and I'm looking at it. I'm like, okay, so I got to set up here. And then I'm like thinking, wait, if he comes down that lower bench, he could come right up that drainage as his passage get up to this. You know, because I'm like thinking, how am I going to set up? Because I already blew deer out of that bed. So he's already got me over here. And now he's got my ground scent over here where I just walked. So I'm like, he's gonna loop around this bed and go to the next bed over. You know, so I set up on that drainage, anticipating him coming up the drainage now in the morning. So I set up on that and set up. When I set up, the deer came straight up the drainage, and I shot him at 25 yards right in the ditch. But he was using that ditch to make sure he could smell everything in there, because everything was flowing right down into that drainage ditch. So he walked right up that drainage in the morning to make sure everything was clear.
Interesting. And where was like the tree that you were set up in according to that drainage again?
I had a south wind, and I was on the south side of that ditch.
Okay,
in the
gotcha.
bowl. So the wind was blowing. So the thermals in the morning were dropping down the ditch, but I was backed up enough that anytime I had a little bit of breeze, I was just pushing it away from that ditch.
Gotcha.
I was just out of it. And it was like one of those scenarios where it's like the only tree that you can get in is this nasty, ugly tree, and that's the one I can get in to shoot them. You know, so I got in that tree. You know, but the tree was specifically placed for the thermal movement. You know, if I was 10 feet off on any other tree, it would have been no good. He would have been out of range, or he would have been busting me with the thermals.
Yeah.
You know, so it's like that has to be the tree. It's ugly as sin, no cover in it, just horrible tree. But that was the tree for the win. You know. Yeah.
Oh man, that deer thought he had you after 3 years of hunting, and it ended up not working out. But I mean, it's funny too. Like another thing take from that is like you bumped him the day before, and he still
he
came
went
back
there.
there.
That was the best spot.
Yeah,
you know, he felt comfortable there.
Yep.
And I busted him in the dark. He didn't know what the heck was going on. You know.
Yeah.
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 It's
we're using
heavy pressured public land. You bust a deer out, they're going to come back to the same places.
Yeah.
Because where else are they going to go? They go over here, they're going to get shot at anyway. So you might as well go to a good spot.
Yeah. Well, you're exactly. It's like, what are they going to do? Go to this other random spot, hoping that this works out. They're like, we know this worked. We know this spot worked out because I was able to get out, and I can see and I can smell, and I have all those advantages. That's the difference with like highly pressured areas versus areas that are, you know, whether it's private or even public that don't get pressure, and then they see somebody and it freaks them out, versus places that, you know, that they don't get pressure.
Yeah, because these deer, they deal with hikers, hunters, like hunting deer hunters, small game hunters. They got turkey hunters coming through there. They got people running coons. They got everything. Like, you know, it's the most popular place in the world to hunt, you know. So they're just surrounded by everything.
Yeah. No,
and they just deal with people, you know.
Yep. But I think on that note, I think we'll wrap this one up, as we've been going for a good hour and 45 minutes here, and I know if I don't cut it off now, that we'll be going until well past my bedtime. So I think I could talk to you all night. But Paul, that was awesome getting to have you on here. I said beforehand, before we started recording, I was like, there's so many things I want to talk to you about that I didn't know how to kind of direct it, which is a good problem to have. But I think it was a good conversation, kind of going into your mind of like how you look at deer hunting and how you look at it. And I think you look at it such an analytical way, but also just take those experiences and are able to make decisions off of it, where I think that's a rare quality of people, of not getting too much paralysis by analysis and overthinking things, but you take those details into serious consideration, but use it to actually make a decision. And it's obvious by the success that works out.
Yeah, it works pretty good.
For sure. But anyways, is there anywhere that you want to direct anybody to check you out on Facebook or anything, or see any of your deer?
I'm on Facebook. That's about it. So I don't know how to do all the other stuff yet. I just got a smartphone in 2020. So
I love it, man. Well, again, thank you, Paul, for coming on, and we'll definitely be talking to you again on here soon.
Yep. If you send me a friend request on Facebook, make sure you send me a message so I know who you are, so I don't have all these weird people messaging me too. Yeah. You get all that spam stuff and all. I'm like, I don't know who this person is, but that's definitely not somebody that's interested in me. You know?
Yeah. There's a chick in bikini that's trying to add you on there. It's like, I don't think it's real.
I saw you on the hunting channel. There you did.
Yeah. Awesome.
Thanks so much for listening to this episode of East Meets West Hunt with your host, Beau Martonik. For more great content and to stay up to date, visit eastmeetswesthunt.com, Facebook at East Meets West Outdoors, and Instagram at East Meets West Hunt. If you enjoyed today's episode, please review and subscribe, and we'll catch you next time.